Welcome to episode 3 of Being Yourself Loudly. In this episode, we're going to do a deep dive into my experience with hustle culture, corporate America, freelance writing, self-employment, and so much more. I also introduce a concept called mindful hustling that has helped me stay ambitious and grounded at the same time. You don't want to miss it. Hi, my name is Isabel Mata, and I am a writer and mental health advocate who is passionate about helping young people live their best lives, no matter where they are at on their mental health journey. As a bisexual Jewish Gemini from Rochester, New York, I let mental illness invisibly rule the first 23 years of my life. But after hitting rock bottom just a year after graduating from NYU, I finally realized that if I truly wanted to be happy, I had to do the work. With a mix of medication, mindfulness, and dialectical behavioral therapy, I somehow managed to not just live, but thrive with my mental illness. And now I want to pay it forward. Meditation, spirituality, hustle culture, sex, and love are all topics we discuss here, along with a bunch of tangible skills that can help you be your best self, even if your brain chemicals are all out of whack. This is Being Yourself Loudly. I don't think there has ever been a time in my life where I wasn't hustling. Since I was a wee child, it has been ingrained in my head that if I want something, I have to earn it through hard work and dedication, regardless of how I might be feeling. As early as 12, I was babysitting and pocketing as much money as I could, working every weekend so that I could save up for that new thing I wanted. In high school, I worked as many as 3 jobs at one time while going to school and while participating in the all-women's a cappella group and the Jewish youth group. While everyone around me was partying and doing normal teenage things, I was working in order to one day make it out of Rochester, a town that felt way too small for my personality. Luckily, I succeeded. I got into NYU, packed my bags, and headed for the big city. When I got there, I realized that everyone around me was hustling just as much as I was. At the time, I honestly felt so happy that I found others who loved working just as much as I did. But it was competitive as fuck. If you weren't working or interning, you weren't living up to your potential, apparently. I remember at one point during my junior year, I literally had 5 jobs at the same time just to be able to afford school, food, and life. It was things like babysitting, work study, internship. I had a weekend editing gig. Oh, yes, and I was a full-time student. It was a lot. But at the time, it just made me feel like a goddamn boss. I really had no idea that other people my age were spending their college years doing other things. It was only after I graduated and began to meet people my age did I realize that for them, college was a time for partying and self-exploration, but not at NYU. I mean, fine, maybe it was for some other people, but I was not one of them. Although, to be fair, I was president of the only all-female a cappella group on campus, the Kleptomaniacs. Peep our album on Spotify. At that time, I worked harder than I ever had because I was determined to make something of myself, and I thought the only way I could do it was by making my resume as kick-ass as possible. I had dreams of climbing the corporate ladder, being editor-in-chief of a magazine, all while saying a big fuck you to everyone who bullied me in high school. While it's impressive what I was able to accomplish in those 4 years, the negative impact that time period had on me is far greater, but I didn't realize it until it was too late. As the years went on, I kept working harder because I thought I needed to grow my resume in order to get a good job after graduation. As my senior year approached, it didn't seem like there were any other paths to reach my goals besides having a full-time job, which, spoiler alert, there are. I was so happy when I got a job as an intern for L'Oreal the summer before my senior year. It was a dope job where I got to create new beauty products for Maybelline, and I got to wear cute outfits every day, all while sitting in an office overlooking all of Manhattan. Every time I walked into our office, the glitz and the glamour reminded me that I had made it, and I was only 21. I felt the status of what I could have if I kept my head down and worked hard. Sure, sometimes people were dicks, but for $33 an hour, I was okay with it, at least for a little bit. At the end of the summer, I was offered a spot in their marketing development program post-graduation. Because I was lucky enough to still live in New York, I asked if I could keep my internship during the school year, and so I did. I graduated from college in 2018 and immediately began working for L'Oreal, not even taking a summer break to chill. I worked at Hudson Yards until I got a new job working for Urban Decay and moved to Newport Beach, California in the fall of 2019. While it was a different brand, the corporate culture was very much the same. Everything was political and no decision could be made unless the person at the top approved it. It was exhausting. When the offices closed for COVID in March 2020, I began to realize just how poorly I was being treated. The culture was terrible, and the fact that we were all working remotely made it even more obvious. So my mental health was plummeting, but I was still tied to my desk. The hustle that I had been living for my whole life, it felt meaningless without all the glitz and glamour and perks that came with working for the largest beauty brand in the world. I was getting more miserable as the months of COVID dragged on, and we had our first summer in quarantine. I remember on my birthday that year, I planned on taking the day off to spend it with my family and partner, and I even got it approved by manager and everything. But a few days before, I got a note from my boss telling me that I had to present a new concept on June 3rd, my birthday, and there was no wiggle room. When I asked if I could do it on a different day, they told me no, and that someone else could present if I didn't want it to. But it was my project, one I had been working on for months. I wasn't just about to let somebody else present it for me and take all the credit. So I gave up my day off and worked until 8 p.m. No one even wished me a happy birthday. Not that I'm bitter or anything. In November of 2020, Richard and I got engaged on a trip to New York, and on the first day back at work, I got laid off. No congratulations, no well wishes, nothing. Just a calendar invite for a chat with HR, and boom, I was let go. At first, I was really bummed. I was supposed to be getting a promotion and had been undervalued pretty much since my first day. There were also multiple times where I was told to keep my opinion to myself and to know my place. It's like they wanted my Gen Z point of view, but only on their terms. After the initial shame and mourning period that came with the layoff, I was left with opportunity. I decided that it was time to be my own boss. I had been freelancing on and off since 2016 and knew that I wanted to write full-time, so I just did it. Because Richard's job was already remote, we were left with an opportunity to choose where we wanted to live. While we loved Newport Beach so much, literally, guys, I went to the beach once a week, felt the ocean in my toes and had high vitamin D levels all year long. But the people, not as much. During COVID and the aftermath, everywhere we went, we were faced with right-wing bimbos who refused to take masks seriously. So we were literally stuck inside our homes unless we wanted Trump supporters to be obnoxious in our faces every time we stepped outside. It was really hard for me as a queer Jewish woman and for Richard as a Mexican-American man. So in December 2020, we decided it was time for a change and we moved to Seattle. It was a new place neither of us had lived, and my parents lived in Kirkland, a city right on the east side of Seattle, and my siblings were in the Bay Area. Richard had never lived anywhere but SoCal and wanted a change of scenery, and he had been to Portland and Seattle before and liked them both a lot. We took a gamble on the gray skies and rain and found a sick condo in a cute area named Ballard, and we began a new life in the Pacific Northwest. While I rejected exercise for the majority of my short life, I have come to terms with the fact that when I get a workout in at least 3 times a week, I feel so much better. And I have Pure Barre Washington to thank for that. With a focus on low-impact, small movements that strengthen and tone your entire body in 50 minutes or less, Pure Barre is a total body bar workout that transforms you physically and mentally. Luckily for all you listeners, Pure Barre Washington, with locations in Green Lake and University, is giving you 20% off your first month of an unlimited membership. Just use the code BULOUDLY. And remember, your first class is always free. See you on the mat! I had never done well with authority, so in theory, working for myself wasn't a bad idea. But it was terrifying. My mental health was in the shitter because of the pandemic, and I felt so alone without a team around me. But even on my darkest days, I still felt that I had to push through to be productive, to make money. While I wasn't dealing with shitty bosses, I was beginning to feel like if I didn't have the job, the title, the glam, or even just the colleagues, I would be nothing. As the months passed and I became my own boss, I felt so much stress, especially on the days when all I needed to do was anything but work. Through headaches, depressive episodes, GI issues, my body was telling me to slow down and take a break. Everything just felt hard. For those that don't know, and if it's not obvious, what I was experiencing was a major burnout. Finally, the years of nonstop hustling were catching up with me. but I still couldn't stop. My worth and identity were so tangled up with my productivity and income that I had no clue who I was if I wasn't working. After a few months of just freelance writing, I was beginning to miss the marketing work that I had done at L'Oreal. I wanted to help brands connect with their consumers, and I wanted to do it through storytelling. So, a few months later, in around February 2021, I started my own creative marketing agency called Rumination Storytellers. It was with this agency where I helped Wendy Zomner launch a new beauty brand called Callie Ray, where I wrote blog posts for Microsoft, and I even produced my own photo shoot for a new sustainable fashion brand. That year, I made more money than I had in all my years in corporate America combined, also while planning a wedding. Although I was working on projects that were super cool and doing awesome shit with well-known brands, between the hours of 9 to 6 p.m., Monday through Friday, I was miserable. Some days I would literally just lay on the floor and cry, praying to make all of the work go away. So, in the fall of 2021, I asked Richard what would happen if I didn't want to work as much as I was currently working. And without skipping a beat, he said nonchalantly, then don't work. I love him so much, it's unreal. Because he's amazing in every way, he told me that he will always support me no matter what, and what I want to do with my spare time is up to me. Whether that's working, painting, learning to sew, anything. And I trusted that he was right. He could support our family on his income alone, no problem. But as a feminist whose first time voting was in the 2016 election, the thought of not working and just living off of someone else's salary just didn't sit well with me, no matter how much I loved and trusted my husband to not treat me like property. I wanted to earn my keep, as they say. I also feared what would happen to my identity if I didn't have a job. I was scared of what it would mean for my values if I suddenly was relying on my partner for everything, who happens to be a straight cis male. Oh, the horror stories I have heard about women who lost everything in divorce. I felt pressure coming from all around to have this individual wealth. But I moved forward. With Richard's support of working less hours and therefore bringing in less money, I began to think about what I wanted to do instead. And with the help of my therapist, we came up with the idea of getting a career coach. I knew that I would be okay if I didn't have one. If I really wanted to start a new career journey and therefore like a new life, I wanted to do it right. And this honestly did mean I needed some help. After doing some research, I found an amazing freelance writing coach whose values aligned with mine, and her name is Jenni Gritters, host of the Writers Co-op podcast and freelance writer. We scheduled an intro call and went from there. Now, before I get into how coaching helped me, I want to say that coaching, therapy, or like any kind of mentorship is a huge privilege. The only reason I could afford to do it is because I saved up enough money during the year before and I wanted to invest it into myself. That being said, it was the best investment I have ever made because it helped me learn about this concept called mindful hustling. But more on that after this short break. There's a common saying that living in New York City will either make you or break you, and it all comes down to one thing: your hustle. But as someone who has lived in the concrete jungle for more than 5 years, I can definitely tell you that making it in New York has a downside: burnout. For those that love the urban lifestyle, but not the stress, exhaustion, and struggle that comes with it, I am so excited to introduce you to Slow City Living, a new podcast by my fellow bisexual queen, Stasia Datskowska. Offering a look into how city dwellers find balance amidst a hectic, fast-paced environment, Slow City Living gives us a fresh perspective that flips the rise and grind straight on its head. Check out SCL for yourself on all platforms and see how you can incorporate slow living into your own lifestyle. I know I am. Now, mindful hustling. What the fuck is that? So, mindful hustling is a concept that essentially allows entrepreneurs, or really anyone, to live a more happy and fulfilling life by making choices that reflect their authentic self and their true values. I also find it incredibly helpful for people who struggle with mental illness, but are also ambitious and driven, i.e., me. I was inspired to learn more about this after my coach Jenni taught me about value misalignment, which is basically a fancy way of saying that your values as a person are not aligning with the values of the job or the people you are working with. For me, I was working with people who treated me poorly, who didn't know how to respect boundaries, and the work that I was doing wasn't stimulating in the ways that I needed to be. All of these are examples of value misalignment. In my opinion, understanding your values is the first step of mindful hustling. If you want to learn more specific things on the subject of values within a freelance business, I highly recommend listening to Season 4, Episode 5 of the Writers Co-op podcast, and it's all about creating a sustainable business structure. I'm going to put the link in the show notes so that you guys can find it later and listen. With Jenni's help, we came up with my core values. One question that I was asked to help me figure out these values was, how do I want to spend my time? What did a day look like for me in this new world of following my core values? How often did I work? How much money do I make? What am I spending my time doing? I urge anyone listening to ask yourself those questions, because you might be surprised what you learn once you let go of the external expectations that have been forced upon you by our capitalistic corporate system. By doing this and asking these questions, I was able to see that I didn't want to sit at a computer all day every day. I wanted flexibility to go for a walk, take a vacation, or even just watch TV in the middle of the day if my mental health was asking for a break. Mindful hustling also allows you to look at your goals from a place of authenticity rather than comparison. We can use some of my goals as an example. In the beginning of coaching, when I was talking about my goals for the book that I'm writing, the first things that I said were that I wanted to be published by a top 10 publisher, I wanted to be featured on Reese's Book Club, and that I wanted to be on the bestsellers list. But upon reflection, with my coach's help, I began to see that these goals don't actually match up with what I actually care about, which is ultimately making an impact. Instead, I was so focused on meeting these goals that I had seen other people get that I didn't even stop to think about whether or not they even matched my values of the life that I wanted to live. While mindful hustling sounds amazing in theory, in practice, it's obviously not that easy, and it largely has to do with fear. Fear of failing, fear of being worthless, fear of not making any money, fear that is a direct result of the hustle culture I experienced for the first 25 years of my life. While I can't make the fear go away, I do have tools for combating it, and maybe they might help you. The first one, which is kind of specific to me, but maybe it'll, resonate in you guys, is to remind myself that the work that I am doing is worth it. Like, if I do this personal work and I be vulnerable, I can live the life that I want to live. I can make a difference. It'll just be about taking the risk of visibility. But I really believe there are not enough examples of young, real, ambitious, successful women killing it at life while also struggling with mental illness. So me being myself loudly, it gives other people permission to do the same. I just have to remember that. Another tool is to create a container for this fear, like a notebook. Now, when I'm anxious and spiraling, instead of just keeping it inside my head, I write it down on a big piece of paper, everything that I'm anxious about, everything that's on my to-do list that I just can't stop thinking about. Today, my notebook has things like create social media content, do PR, send pitches, and a whole bunch of other stuff that I've just been avoiding because I'm scared of the rejection that may follow. But instead of ruminating over it, I simply close the notebook and move on to other things. At the end of the day, fear is inevitable. Even now, I still struggle with feeling worthy on days when I just want to rest and watch Gilmore Girls. Or days when I look at the boss bitches on Instagram sharing how much they made in a month, doing the thing I want to be doing, just being themselves. But I know that this fear, this anxiety, it's the price of admission for chasing my goal of being myself loudly. And honestly, it's one I will proudly pay if it means I get to keep doing this work and sharing my experience with all of you along the way. Thank you for listening to this episode, and be sure to tune in to a new episode every 2 weeks on Sunday. This podcast is free to listen to and available in any app that supports podcasts. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and rate and review wherever you are listening. Don't forget to take your meds.